Sure. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Do we have any self-identification of members that might have any conflicts with today's agenda? All right. Could I get an approval for the December 8th minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes. Randy Pope.
Second?
Christie, I second.
All right. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, signify by saying aye. Thank you. All right. Into the meat of the agenda. First thing we have here is a Brighton Center update.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a smooth travels if you had to make it into the office this morning. Everyone is doing well at KCC so far. So, David, do you mind putting the PowerPoint up this morning?
Yeah, I need to be made a co-host.
I'm on it.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, should be good now.
Okay, does everybody see that?
Awesome. Thank you so much. So wanted to provide a quick update on some of the things that have been happening in the Career Center. If you can go to the next slide, David. So our business services has been busy this last couple months. Eric Owsley as our regional workforce strategies coordinator and Marcia Massey, one of our business service representatives, have developed and facilitated a focused talent webinar for employers. We held that on January 29th and had 27 employers in attendance. And that webinar was really designed to help employers get the most out of focused talent, which is a free recruiting tool to them through the Career Center network. And so really want them to be able to utilize that and get the most out of that. That's also, of course, where our job seekers are putting in their information and you know, looking for jobs. And so really helping them utilize that increases that connection between our job seekers and our employers. So we were excited with the turnout for that and excited to be able to continue to offer that webinar for employers. The other thing that we've had happening is some rapid response activity. Eagle Manufacturing has been kind of going through some preparing for some layoffs, and the first round of those is happening in March. And through our rapid response coordinator, who's also Eric Owsley, and then in collaboration with a lot of our Northern Kentucky Business Service partners, inclusive of Triad and Gateway and the Northern Kentucky Chamber, we have really been able to kind of meet those affected workers before their layoff, and have connected 13 employers to our rapid response events who will be able to meet with those over 120 affected workers, really kind of minimizing the amount of time that they're spending with unemployment and making that direct connection from layoff employer to employers in our area that are hiring and in need of individuals. And then also this week is a big week for us at the Career Center. It is our New Year, New Career Job Fair, which is on Thursday, February 11th. And we're doing a little CQI, continuous quality improvement with this. It's the new format of holding 2 virtual sessions, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon, so that both employers and job seekers can utilize the time that works best for them. So we have 14 employers that will be attending that between the morning and the afternoon session. So a couple things happening on our job seeker services. We held a career expo with YLD, which is Brighton Center's youth leadership development in Newport, for both the youth and parents to learn about the KCC and in-demand industries. And that was a good outreach opportunity for us. We have also been continuing to move forward with our workshops. Kentucky Essential Skills has been happening. That we've transitioned that into a virtual environment, a job search success, and then our resume workshop. With those workshops, we've had 30 attendees in the last month on those workshops. And then also excited to say that our SAMHSA Lift Up program has officially launched for job seeker services earlier this month. And we began connecting customers with KCC program staff. Journey Recovery staff came to the Career Center and toured the Career Center, learned about our services, and have been making referrals for their customers struggling with substance use to get connected to employment. And, thanks to our partners with Life Learning Center and St. Elizabeth and the WIB on this project as we're excited to get that up and running. And then if we can transition, awesome. Thank you, David, you're on it. So also wanted to provide an update on our youth work experience. In the last meeting, there was some conversation about these dollars as the spending of the funds has been impacted by the pandemic. And so we've identified some strategies that fall into kind of three main categories that allow us to really back in to the numbers that we need to fully expend those dollars this fiscal year. And so those strategies buckets are outreach, and then assessment and connection and engagement. So we want to outreach to 100 to 150 youth that are in our targeted population. And that targeted population for WIOA youth is not just individuals within that age range of 16 to 24. It includes some assessing WIOA eligibility to identify barriers, including those who are justice involved, who have been in foster care or have left the foster care system, and those youth that are pregnant or parenting, just to name a few of some of those kind of key barriers there. The partners, some of the key partners that we've identified are Every Child Succeeds, NECO, Transitions, Youth Build, Homeward Bound. These are partners that we have relationships with, and we are really looking to identify strategies as customers are not our normal kind of create pipelines of people going out to programming is that has been modified. And so we're really digging in on those strategies that are making people feel comfortable with accessing safe and socially distant services and getting those connections happening. For example, Every Child Succeeds is doing, there is normally a home visitation program, and they're doing virtual, programming with their young moms. We know in the Northern Kentucky area that they're serving 400 young moms, over 400 young moms that are a lot of them in that age range. And so that helps us to really do some targeted outreach rather than kind of broad scope outreach. And so as we move to that assessment and connection, we can really assess those WIOA eligibility, again, kind of those key barriers that help people get through the WIOA eligibility process. Also looking at low income as for individuals who are a family size of one, they need to be making under $13,000 a year in order to qualify for these services. And for young moms who might have one child, we're looking at around $15,000 per year. And so really we've identified that of those that we outreach to, 50 to 75 of those will get connected through that assessment and connection process. And also want to lift up that those customers who are not WIOA eligible are not going to get turned away. They're going to get connected to our Opportunity Youth Workforce Navigator. And that is funded through the Hale U.S. Bank Foundation dollars that Brighton Center has brought in to collaborate with our WIOA funding. And then finally, that engagement piece of 15 to 20 youth that we're going to get placed into work experience opportunities. We've identified key milestones for youth engagement that provide success in that WIOA process. So really helping that process, as we know, can be a little bit cumbersome, and really identifying those key milestones and small wins that will help customers to feel as though they're moving forward. And we have an employer pipeline lined up for these youth interns. So we have positions ready to go, which really helps to speed up that process as well. So looking at those big buckets, outreach, assessment and connection and engagement will get us to that fully expended youth work experience. So, and that is all I've got this morning. Any questions?
Ellen, I just want to add, yeah, did you say it was 13,000? Was the income for a family of one?
So for a family size of one, just under 13,000, yes.
Okay. Okay. Oops.
Good presentation, Ellen. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, well, we'll move on to the grant update that Tony's going to give us.
Yes, it's the SAMHSA grant, the Lift Up grant that St. Elizabeth is taking the lead in. And there's not much to report this month. As Ellen said, the staff just started seeing clients at the beginning of the month. So it's just getting geared up. But a group of us has been contacting nonprofits and businesses to tell them about the program and the benefits of hiring recovery clients. Now, like I said, I don't have any numbers to report because everything's so new, but hopefully at the next meeting, because we are going to continue to talk to businesses, nonprofits, let them know what's going on. Hopefully we'll be connecting the clients with employment soon. And, there'll be a lot of good things coming out of this grant. I do want to say, and Tara's going to talk a little bit more about this, but if you have the time, come to the Partner for Success meeting tomorrow and learn more about everything. And that's all.
All right, thank you. So next up on our agenda is Liberty and David to give us a fiscal update and a metric update. I don't know who wants to go first. I guess Liberty, you're first on the agenda.
Okay. David, can you bring that up on the screen for us? Thank you so much.
Okay, here we go. So the report that we're looking at today, at the upper left corner, we're looking at December of 2020, which is 50% of the fiscal year. And if you go down to the lower right corner, you'll see our expenditures. There's really nothing out of the ordinary happening with our expenditures at this point in time. With 34% for the ad, the 86% that you see there. I did add the date ranges if you go to the far left column. So that 86% is for the time frame July through December of 2020. And then we'll have a separate line item for contract period January through June.
Hey, Tara, can you make that a little bit bigger? Everybody's eyesight might be better than mine.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you. So Liberty, that 28%, is that about where we were this same time last year, or is it better?
No,
worse?
we're still below. A large reason is there's several reasons. I think COVID has, impacted how many kids are, or not kids, but people who are going to training. We did have a small influx of training requests for January. So in January's report, you'll see that line item increase slightly. No, we're a good, I don't have the exact number, but we're a good, I would say 10 to 15% below our spending from this point in time last year.
And Jamie, I was kind of waiting for that question. So if you don't mind, Liberty, I'm just going to add something here. So we, the plan that Ellen outlined, which I thought that she did a really nice job talking about outreach, that is really in response to our request for, really thinking hard about how are we going to get to some of the clients that otherwise maybe we would have come into contact with, but, due to COVID, people are not gathering in ways and not going to the same places where, we previously would have reached them. So that's really part of the, response to how can we better, spend those dollars. And so I've really appreciated the entire Brighton team really really getting behind that. The other thing that I did want to share is that we are not that this necessarily makes us feel better, but this is not something unique to Northern Kentucky. Every other WIB is mentioning the same challenges with reaching clients and having clients just not enrolling in training the same way that they were, and youth not, you know, signing up for work experience the same way that they typically would. The WIB directors have submitted an application and verbally to the cabinet to actually ask for basically an additional year to spend the youth work experience funds, and we hope to hear about that soon. But we did hear on that national, so if you look on the far left column, kind of in the next, let's see, sort of like lower boxes at the bottom, it says NDWG. And if you look across there, it shows 4%. That is our National Dislocated Worker Grant. And that, just as a reminder for everybody, is that program where nonprofit employers partner with us and can hire temporary workers that are doing like humanitarian, health and safety, basically like COVID related activities for approximately 6 months. It can vary just a little bit. It's actually a dollar amount of about $20,000 per person. But those temporary jobs have been extraordinarily difficult to fill. And we did hear from the cabinet last week that we will be getting an extension on spending those dollars. And so we'll now have until March of 2022 to spend those funds. And we did get some additional flexibility from them on where it doesn't have to be time bound. We can just do a per person average of that 20,000 per person. So we are hopeful that that is going to be helpful to our existing partners and maybe even give us some time to continue. I know we've actually did a call for partners and got 3 more prospective partners this past, like within the last couple weeks. But we're just going to continue to work on that. I hope that's helpful, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, that you answered my follow-up question in regards to what's the rest of the state look like, but hopefully as y'all get together, you can share your best practices, and if one state figures out or one district figures out how to do it, they share it with the others.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll continue to do that too.
Other questions for Liberty or Tara? All right, David, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, gonna unmute, and there's a great transition to the next file. All right, so programmatically, things through December we're very much on track at the Career Center from the business service team. Job postings, they're very much on track where they were last year. The unemployment rate is slowly creeping back up, but some of that is because, in my opinion, because of a seasonal adjustment, and we didn't do as much seasonal hiring throughout the Christmas season, stuff like that. Labor participation rate, we're actually slightly up in North Kentucky from last month, but across the state and the United States, that's trending downward. In the circles with the business service team, we're definitely on track. We're a little behind where we were last year on advanced manufacturing. Construction always takes a dip this time of year. Healthcare, we've exceeded last year's numbers. Business IT, there was a big spike over the last fiscal year because of IRS activity. So we're not really behind on business IT. Transportation logistics, which is the bread and butter of North Kentucky, we are right on track with where we've been for the last 2 years, if you really want to look at that in trends in the past. Hiring events, participating employers specific to hiring events, we're rapidly going to exceed what we did last year. We're only 6 months into the fiscal year, but that's just because of I'm trying to think of a better way to phrase it. I just say just the hard hitting, the amount of hiring events we're doing at CVG, the virtual job fairs, just all the work, the boots on the ground that the KCC business service team is doing. Tours, we've exceeded last year. We never did a lot of tours, but we're working to do a lot more virtual tours. We have the perfect storm for doing virtual business tours right now. Rapid response, that's another one where we had a lot more IRS activity last year. And then this is where we get to like the people in the door, the basic career services. For the situation we're in, we're doing real well. The 1,247, we have to remember that that is just in person on site, where there's like a one-on-one interaction between a job seeker and a talent development specialist. Our career services, our enrollments, we have to remember part of this number is carryover from the previous fiscal year, because some people have what 1 and 2 and 3 year ITAs. So we're still very much probably going to meet or exceed what we did last year. Training services, which is eligibility enrollment required. These are actual WIOA customers. WIOA youth internships, like Ellen had said, we're going to see some more of these numbers through January and February go up. This is just through the end of December. Our outcomes, the preliminary outcomes of people, these are state negotiated rates. These numbers will be updated on the January KPI. They're updated quarterly and to keep with the reporting schedule. So at the beginning of third quarter, we'll be seeing the last set of numbers. Applicant interviews, we've already exceeded last year's numbers of applicant interviews. And that, like I said, that goes back to the amount of job fairs and hiring events that we've done. Job placements are definitely on the rise. We're higher than we were at this point last year. We haven't exceeded last year's number yet, but we're close to that. Customer satisfaction, employer satisfaction are very similar to where they were last month. We might have lost, I think, 0.6% on job seeker. And that is just because we see less job seekers, so we don't have the volume of survey results. And so 1 or 2 low numbers kind of throws off the whole batch. And that's kind of it for the programmatic KPI. If anybody's got any questions, comments, there are some additional reports that I've been making that kind of goes into the trends and the breakdown of the basic career services numbers. Those, I think we add more to the business service packet. But outside of that, if there's any questions or comments.
So David, I don't know, for the metrics that you report on, and this might be geared towards you, Tara, as well, is there any way, I mean, even if it's just one of these metrics, but do any of the districts across the state track any of this? You know, for example, I look down there in the bottom left, applicant interviews, 1,070. I mean, that's great. I mean, obviously it's better than what we did last year, but what if the rest of the state's doing 2,070? You know what I mean?
Sure.
We have to benchmark ourselves against something other than ourselves, even if it's just for 1 or 2 of these.
Yeah, that's a good question. I am not aware of exactly how they track this, but I would be happy to reach out to my counterparts and find out. The other thing that, you know, I think these numbers are great. They definitely show how hard the teams are really working throughout the KCC to really reach out to businesses and to try to serve clients. But I mean, I know just anecdotally, it's still been really, really challenging to fill open positions. And this particular, you know, we talk about job postings and interviews, but if we see, you know, if we've got 1,000 interviews and we've got 500 job placements, you know, we still have a lot of open positions. So to talk to David about. So sorry, David, surprise. To try to see if there's a way that we can work on that. We're also working really closely with Lisa Mulcahy and some Kimberly Rossetti with Triad to think about those metrics as well, and to think about, you know, overall for the entire region, you know, what does success look like from a workforce standpoint? So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's kind of what we're thinking out.
And this is our like a local snapshot of like the work being done at the Career Center. At the state level, what they report to DOL is just market penetration, repeat business customers. And there's a third metric that we report to the state. But so like Tara said, well, I'm not 100% sure how they report in the other areas. But all of this data does come from NKWIB, which is the state system. So they have access to the same stuff. It's all dependent on what their business service teams actually enter into NKWIB. Like we
Hey, David.
specifically enter in interviews from hiring events, things like that.
Hey, David, is it possible for you to pull out the same information for a different region?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, see, we don't even have to ask them.
Yeah,
Well,
we can- right there.
Excuse me, I
I'd
dropped
also
something.
like to add that the other areas, I mean, we're also different. For example,
Mhm.
EKSEP has, I think, 26 counties.
Right.
And of course, Bluegrass and Kentuckiana Works are heavily populated. So and of course, we have so many jobs available, whereas some of the other areas, I think Western Kentucky probably does not have nearly as many available jobs. So it's a little hard to compare, but it would certainly be interesting to do so.
Yeah, I mean, obviously things that are on a percentage basis are more helpful than those on a raw number basis. But, you know, for those of you, well, anyway, it's easier to do on a percentage basis.
Well, and
All right.
one thing I would one thing I would just add, going back to that report, actually looking at the numbers of jobs available, maybe saying, setting a benchmark of whatever 30% or whatever that may be, looking at that number as a goal to try to get to, since that would be more realistic for our region. I know that's what we do. We say if there's this many jobs available, we try to target a certain percentage of those jobs and then compare what we actually are able to fill versus what's available.
All right, good report. So, Tara, looks like I've turned it over to you to wrap up about everything left on the agenda.
Yes, sir. And even though it doesn't look like a lot, I hope you all will bear with me because I do actually have quite a bit to go over. I'll start with my director's report. It's pretty much most of it has been covered already. Tony, we already talked about the career link. We will be doing contract monitoring coming up later this month. And then I believe it's May, we'll have the state monitoring. So this committee gets that report. So just letting you know that that's on track. Also letting you know that, and you've kind of heard about this probably in the full WIB meeting, but just wanted to bring this committee up to speed that the Business Services Committee has been leading an effort that is required by state statute. The Kentucky Department of Education maintains curriculum lists for Kentucky schools, really high schools, career and technical education programs. And the Department of Education has an approved list of industry certifications. And it is the responsibility of all local WIBs to undertake a community engagement effort where we actually work with employers to talk about what's on that list and to really assess and to provide feedback to the state about, is there anything that needs to come off? It's just antiquated, learners should not be talking about it or learning about it. And is there anything missing? And so several of the committee members that are here today have been a part of that. Looking at Francis O'Hara in my bottom left-hand corner as one person in particular, but I know there's others. And so I'm sorry if I leave anybody out, but Dave Fleischer has been really passionate about this. And so between Francis and Dave, we've been able to assemble a pretty cool group of education and training folks, as well as other workforce development allies, to be able to divide up the list into our industry target areas and then go out and elicit employer feedback about the list. And so let's see, next week, the Business Services Committee will meet again and go over recommendations I'll give you guys an example, because when I first heard about this, I'm like, this is like, Greek to me, right? I'm not sure if I understand, but once you start diving into it, it becomes a little bit more clear. So here's an example you might be familiar with. I don't know about you, but at the end of December, my computer at home and my computer at work popped up and said, Adobe Flash is no longer going to be working and you're going to need to uninstall it. Well, Adobe Flash is one of the certifications that's listed on this KDE list. So that needs to come off of there. So just trying to kind of put in perspective of the kind of things we're talking about. That's an IT business finance, sector certification. There's also certifications for healthcare, for advanced manufacturing, for construction. All of our target industries have these credentials or certifications that schools are allowed to teach. Now, I will say, not every school is going to teach every single one of these things. There's no way. There's hundreds of them, right, Francis? So, but I did want you all to be aware that this is a responsibility of the WIB. We have been taking it really seriously. David Klockner has put together some really amazing things to be able to see from our data sources, Jobs EQ, Burning Glass, what job descriptions that are out in the marketplace are saying in terms of certifications that employers are requiring, at least that they're requiring on the job description. But this interview process is a way for us to really dive in more deeply and make sure that we're really understanding. And of course, if we're just looking at the data, we're not going to know which ones really need to come off there versus maybe they just didn't mention it. So I think it's been a pretty good process. It's really been good for us to better align with partners like the Kentucky Chamber. Zach Morgan, who's their Northern Kentucky person, has been really great to work with, and the Health Collaborative, and Lorena Moore from Navigo, and Shelley Baker from Youth Apprenticeship. I mean, there's just been a lot of individuals who've kind of come together. And so if you get a message from us, if you're one of the employers in the room and you get a request from somebody that says, hey, can you take a second and look over this list? Really would appreciate it if you just take a look really quick. We divided it up so you can kind of put ideas of additional ones that are missing at the top, or you can make a note on the side and say, this is old, take this off. So that's one of my big updates. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. And then I just wanted to check on something. Everyone should have received in the mail a copy of like a redlined bylaws. If you remember at the last WIB meeting, I'm getting some nods from some people. I'm getting some maybe nods from others. If you did not get a redline copy of the bylaws in the mail, if you would please reach out to me and let me know, because the proposal was discussed at the last WIB meeting, then we were required to mail you a copy. You've received it via email as well, obviously. And then at the March meeting, we are going to, the MBO committee is going to ask you for a vote on those proposed changes. And so we just want to make sure that everybody gets the hard copy. So we try to check addresses, but you just never know. So anyway, if you come to determine that you don't have one, please let us know. And as Tony said, tomorrow we have one of this committee's members, Jamie Johnson, will be on our panel for Partner for Success. So thank you, Jamie. And we have a representative from Life Learning Center, Rosemarie Gossett, is going to be on the panel as well. And then Lori Zombeck from Boone County Fiscal Court. And they're going to have a really tactical conversation that'll be moderated by WIB member Vicki Burling. Really practical conversation about hiring practices related to individuals in recovery. And we really did try to kind of go that direction of like, well, what does this really look like? And I think it's going to be great. So if you haven't signed up yet, there is still a few spots left in the Zoom. So we hope that you will join us. And if you can't, but you want somebody else on your team to listen in, we would really love that. Okay, I think that is my entire, I am also required to let you know that the NKWIB audit is complete. there were no findings, and it will be available via email or hard copy if anyone needs to take a look at that. Okay, that is my full report. So Jamie, unless there's other questions, I'd like to move on to the strategic planning component of the agenda. I kind of want to do, we talked about this a little bit at the WIB meeting in January, but I just kind of want to lay out for everybody because there's a lot of words that get thrown around. So WIOA and the Commonwealth of Kentucky require us to do a local plan and a regional plan. And the local plan and the regional plan are really what I would call comprehensive plans. They are quite lengthy. The executive committee decided that because there is something called plan fatigue, that if we're going through the process of local and regional planning already, it would be very nice and efficient if we all went ahead and took that opportunity to create the board strategic plan concurrently with that process. So really taking the additional time to really rise up high priorities. And I will say that some things have already come out of the process that we're seeing as far as trends that a lot of board members are rising to the top. So I feel really good about that. We submitted the timeline to you all at the January meeting. And you might recall that we were planning to have all this finalized in May. And it's, February now. So we were pretty much on target for that. I did find out last week that the state actually, even though they had told me via email that they had the deadline of June 30th, they actually have changed the deadline to the end of March for the local and regional plan. I see Kevin yeah, that's what I did too, Kevin. Oh, okay. So that's okay. We can maintain the timeline for the strategic planning process and make sure that we give you all ample time to really dive into those topics throughout the sort of later March and April months. But we do need to dive in more quickly to the local and regional components. And so I've been working with Dana Dobbs really closely on this. And and the good news is you guys already took a survey. If you recall that survey, just bringing up this document here so I can look. So we actually already have a lot of feedback from all of you on some of these topics. And so what we're going to do today in the, let's see. Oh yeah, we got plenty of time. Is we are going to go through these sections of the plan that for the local/regional plan that affect the program youth committee. And I'm going to just kind of briefly go over each question. And I'm going to tell you what we've heard in the survey. And then I'm going to ask for additional feedback if anybody has any. So we're going to have a conversation. So I see you guys turning off your cameras, but we really do need your feedback because as you can imagine, writing a 189 page document in a couple weeks is kind of tricky. So we definitely would like you to hang with us here. And I promise to make this as interactive and I'll dare say fun as we can possibly make it. So I know we all want to go play outside in the snow, but we're going to do this. It's going to be great. So, okay, first question. We were asked to describe our efforts to coordinate supportive services provided through workforce investment activities in the local area, things like facilitating childcare, transportation, and other appropriate support services for customers. Now, definitely heard in the survey, Shannon Starkey-Taylor couldn't join us today, but she was actually said in the survey, thankful for what the WIB has already done to support childcare. And if you all remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a vote to allow some of that national dislocated worker money to go for childcare training just because the need is so desperate in that sector. And really, so many of us depend on childcare, right, to be able to go to work. And so it's really like a sort of a foundational piece. One of the things I just wanted to add is that the WIB, our WIB's policies in the past, we don't really have a lot in the line of what we would call support services for customers in terms of, funding those. If someone needs transportation, we would typically fund, a bus pass or some other transportation long enough until they are able to get their first paycheck, for example. And we're able to do like a little bit of that. I don't know if Tony, if you want to mention that, but I was just curious if you all had any additional thoughts about things that you have concerns about related to those kind of support services. Typically, reading into it a little bit, but kind of known that we have such a robust nonprofit community in our region who are able to support clients. And so have really kept the WIOA dollars focused on the training and like career services piece. Tony, would you say that that's accurate?
Yes, it is. And also, historically in the past, we've had smaller amounts of money. And so we really didn't have the money available for the support services if we were going to concentrate on training. So that's part of the reason that we just don't offer those support services. Now for youth, we do offer transportation and have always offered it simply because the youth are in a little more unique situation where a lot of them just have no way to get around. So we would offer either a month, 2 weeks to a month of transportation, either bus passes or gas money until they got their first check. And then we would cut that off. But we just have not historically done it for adults.
So this is the kind of thing, though, that in a planning process, it's kind of nice for the board to just sort of think through, hey, do we still feel like that's appropriate? So I just wanted to mention that to you all and see if there was any feedback. Okay. Well, if you decide that you would like, if you think on it and you feel like you want to, change course, let me know. I think personally, it's obviously, the board, this is a board-led activity, but I do think it makes sense for us to focus limited dollars on career services since that's really our mission and real focus. And then we obviously have a very robust partnership with a lot of other nonprofits if somebody needs something else. That's kind of the whole point of the one stop, right, is that we're able to connect to other providers. Okay, but just want to let you guys know that is a choice. Okay, the next question. We are asked to outline the local board's efforts to ensure continuous improvement of eligible providers of training and education. And so that's why I outlined for you all the certification process, the review of industry certifications and that process. Randy, you've been a part of that too. And, we can outline that, but I think this is more of an update for you guys. A lot of what's come out of that conversation and what I'm seeing in the survey responses is the board really questioning that we really probably need a stronger tie year round to the K-12 system, to our friends in middle school, high school, guidance counselors, et cetera, and a lot more straightforward understanding of what those pathways look like. That's the feedback that we got in the survey. When I asked, how are our relationships going with education, and a lot, like probably the highest amount of feedback that I got back was, I'm not really sure what that is. So, and a number of recommendations that we strengthen those relationships. And so I just wanted to bring that up to this group because program and youth, obviously, this would be really a place where those ties between education and workforce would really be reported and really monitored. And so, Randy, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but just wanted to mention that that's what the survey said, and if you all had any other feedback.
I think you hit it very well. I think an ongoing relationship just makes us all stronger. and the work with Francis and the K-Tech person, I think it's right on gear with these things that we're also doing, as you know, from the Ed Council on that alignment. So I think the work that we did the other year together as a team on essential skills, and that is still great. Now we just got to, continue working on that partnership and letting them know what's available, because I think most of the counselors, if you ask them what WIB stood for, they wouldn't know unless you said Workforce Investment Board. So I think that's
Yeah.
good.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. Did anybody else have any thoughts about that relationship building or anything in particular that you think you would like to see in the plan regarding those relationships? Okay, and I'm glad Ryan hints. So once again, if you think of something that you'd like to see added later, please just let me know here in the next maybe like week or so. Moving on, I'm glad Ryan Henson is here. See, this is great because I can see all your faces, so I can just like put you on the spot. We also have a call out in the plan to talk about how we can help facilitate and increase accessibility and programming for individuals with disabilities. This is another area in the survey where a number of board members reflected that they just didn't feel like they understood what was really, being done. And so, there were a number of ideas regarding better communication amongst partners, having an opportunity within committee or board meetings to really highlight this work. And then, even specialized hiring events or things of that sort for employers. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I was going to add, some call out in the plan about needing to better fulfill that need for the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's awesome. Years and years ago, it seems like we would do some like informational meetings for the board, some updates for the KCC partners, things of that nature. At one point in time, we talked about having, I think, an ad hoc committee to look at services for individuals with disabilities. Just kind of talk, but I think all those are great ideas. We do a lot of stuff. It could even be something like, I could give an update quarterly or even at meetings to update the board on what types of things we're doing locally with, you guys are talking about high schools. We have the first 2 project search sites in the state are in Northern Kentucky with Cengage and Northern Kentucky University, Boone County Schools and Campbell County Schools. So I'm open to whatever and would love it. So
Great.
Whatever ideas or thoughts any of the board or this committee or anyone else have would be awesome. I think one of the things is we probably work with, we work with a lot of different people. So like, Alicia and her group, if there are ways that we can communicate, we probably work with a lot of the same individuals, and we can kind of add a layer of services and dollars and money that don't have any strings attached to it other than being eligible for our services. I think it's just another tool to help get folks employed or trained or what have you. So all good ideas that I'm certainly open to.
That's great. I think that would really strengthen our work. Go ahead, Jamie.
I'm curious, does a committee member have to be a board member?
No. Well, for this committee and for the Business Services Committee, they do not. And also keep in mind that anybody can also just attend a committee meeting. All these meetings are open too. So you could also have, guests.
I was just thinking that, lots of times where you want to put, your money where your mouth is that, what's the opportunity of us even adding a somebody to this committee that would meet that criteria? That would certainly ensure we would have a continued focus on that if we did that.
Absolutely. That's very much within your abilities based on the bylaws. Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to just make a note of that. Okay. That's a great idea. I have a number of ideas, Ryan, especially with that idea of like a quarterly update. I mean, when we communicate, that's when we start noticing ideas for collaboration, right? And so I think adding some things to the agenda where it's going to happen on a regular basis, I think would really, really help just align efforts in a way that it's not really happening right now. So, and Jamie, I like that idea of adding a committee member. Definitely.
Yeah,
Maybe,
I mean, I'm open to
go ahead.
whatever, Tara, whatever
Okay.
ideas anyone comes up with, we'll help support. I mean, this is the work that we do every day
Yeah.
inside the Career Center. So I'd be happy to help out, support, lead that effort, however you guys feel.
Okay, great. Well, this is just the beginning. The good news is this is just the planning part. So, but yeah, I'd love to see that continue forward. So it's in red in my notes now. So it's real. So, unfortunately we're going to have to move on because we got 3 more questions. It's only 3 more questions. You guys are almost done. So this is going great. The next one is about describe the local board's assessment of the type and availability of adult and dislocated worker employment and training services in the local area. And so the way that most people answered this question on the survey was responding that, and Randy mentioned essential skills. A lot of our employer members still mention the need for those kind of employability essential skills amongst their employees. And I would say from what I've heard from the Career Center, that kind of echoes what we're hearing in the marketplace. Ellen is shaking her head. We've also heard, of course, about specific technical skills, and some of that certification effort, really has identified that piece. So I don't know that we need to get into the technical skill piece as much, because I think we're kind of handling that in a different part of the plan. But as far as essential skills, Career Center offers those trainings for employers for sure. They're happening in schools. Randy mentioned, there's the whole certification piece. I did ask, it's still relatively new, but I did ask that maybe like next year, the board will be able to get some data about how many students are taking advantage of that certificate, because I think that would be helpful to sort of know, what's the absorption rate, if you will, of that essential skills certificate. But I was just curious from the board standpoint, this is a trend that we continue to hear a lot. I mean, COVID has certainly not helped with those kinds of things. I mean, I know my own children, I'm like, they don't seem to be able to organize their thoughts anymore because they're just sort of like taking in information from the screen. But I was just kind of curious if anybody had any additional things that you wanted to see in the plan around either essential skills, which again was really the basis of the survey, or any other training availability. Okay. I'll just add one other thing on that after we go through the KDE process, which we also need to finish by March, incidentally, we will also be taking that same list and doing a cross-reference. David's done an awesome job of taking the list and of things that we're hearing from employers and comparing it to what's already on the KDE list. We're going to be doing the same thing with the ETPL, the eligible training provider list, which is what we are able to pay for through WIOA. And so we really think that taking that an additional step will help identify any gaps in training that might exist in our region. So I meant to tell you that earlier. Okay, 2 more. This is all about youth. It actually asks, this is more of an update. It asks for strategies that we will use for increasing our out-of-school youth expenditure. We are already prioritizing out-of-school youth versus in-school youth. And that happened years ago. So we're kind of ahead. That's been a trend in WIOA of getting to that. That's something that the Northern Kentucky WIB has been doing for several, or if not many years now. And so just so you all know, you're already meeting that expectation. So that's good. But you did hear from Ellen how the team plans to increase out of school expenditures in terms of youth work experience and outreach, et cetera. And so we do intend to add what you heard from Ellen, into the plan in terms of very targeted outreach, which again would kind of have been happening anyway, but virtual meetings make it a little trickier. But I just wanted to give anybody an opportunity, if you had any questions or input about youth overall, to have a chance to talk about that here. Okay. So this last question is sort of interesting, and I wish that I had more information about it, but I do not. And so, I'm just going to read it to you word for word. The other ones I've kind of been summarizing because I just want you to be aware that this question is on the plan. I will do my best to try to get some additional feedback from the state about what exactly it is that they're looking for on this one, and probably take it to another committee. So you might, if you're on the executive committee, for example, or if you're on the strategic planning committee, you will probably hear this question again. But they would like us to describe how our region will establish or continue to improve an integrated English literacy and civics education program that provides educational services consisting of literacy and English language acquisition integrated with civic education that includes instruction of the rights and responsibilities of citizenship and civic participation. So this question was not on the survey per se, because this is a new question that was just added last week. However, we did get some really great response just on the survey from a few individuals who mentioned that they would really like to make sure that the board and the KCC are creating safe spaces for English language learners to be able to acquire additional English skills and to be able to, really, be a part of our talent pool, right? And to be able to find jobs. And I wholeheartedly, agree. The KCC already has had a number of programs that have been developed. And then I know just anecdotally have been working with a few different employers to try to come up with, coaches or ESL classes. And I guess ESL is maybe not what they call it anymore. I used to teach ESL classes when I was in college, so that's the name that continues to come to my mind. But English language classes, be they in Spanish or French or any other language that, would be needed. The part that I am not certain about of this question is the civic education piece and the citizenship part. As we talked about earlier, the WIB and the KCC are really focused on equipping people with the career skills that they need in order to, to work and to meet the skills that are required for a specific job. So I'm really just not familiar with exactly what that would look like on the civic education side. And I didn't know if there's anybody here, maybe from another provider, that had any thoughts about how we might go. I see Alicia, you took your mute off. Do you have thoughts about how we would be responding to that, or Katrina?
Just a couple of things I was thinking is that I think that we can anticipate at the federal level a pretty hard push on immigration reform and to look at a relief for the bureaucratic nonsense that goes on to pursue citizenship in the U.S. So I think we can anticipate that. We may not see it during this session of Congress, but certainly I think that the move will be a front for the next session. And so that's one thing. The next thing is Katrina and I have a really good relationship, and I'm sure Ellen does too, with Reed at Esperanza. And if this is something that you would like for us to pursue a conversation with Reed to see, I mean, perhaps this is, and again, I'm speculating, but an education piece that the state wants us to take on relative to looking at pathways to legal citizenship and supporting individuals that are trying to pursue that. I mean, again, this is speculation, but I think that partnering with Esperanza and some immigration attorneys might be helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
For sure.
and I was just going to echo that the same thing that, the partnership with Esperanza, I think would be a good start. The Center for Great Neighborhoods, also, they do some outreach to different populations. So those people that have been working in that space, I think would be good partners to help sort of navigate through this.
Those are good suggestions. I know Ellen has done a lot with Brian Wright, who is maybe not, well, I don't know. Ellen, do you want to talk a little bit about what Brian's up to too?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian works with an organization called Cincinnati Compass, which is connected with the Cincinnati Regional Chamber. Our big work together has been working with foreign trained immigrants who are skilled in many of them having credentials and degrees from other countries, and helping to get those transferred in kind of conferred into the correlating degree in the US, so that when employers are looking at their credentials, and so that those certifications can be transitioned into the career fields that they're trained in and foreign country into the US. And so we've been working a lot with the West Global Talent Bridge on their skilled immigrant integration program, and connecting with some employers that Tara had mentioned with English language learning classes and opportunities to get those individuals connected. There's a lot of work on the WIOA side of that within creating career pathways for individuals to confer those degrees. That pathway looks very different depending on the industry and what's required. Sometimes there's a very straightforward pathway, and sometimes it does require some additional training for those individuals, depending on the degree in the industry that they're in. So we're working on creating kind of career pathway guides for two of our in-demand industries, focusing on engineering and then accounting as well. And then also looking at creating guides for WIOA in terms of services that are available and how to get immigrants and refugees connected to WIOA services, because they are a group that citizenship is not a requirement in order to receive those. It's just looking at immigrant and refugee populations and that documentation.
Okay, that's helpful, Ellen. Thank you. So just for the purposes of our plan, I think what I'm going to do is outline some of the groups that were mentioned and the intention to create more partnerships with those. But Alicia, I think, and Katrina, moving forward, I do think it would be interesting to have, I think Ellen has kind of talked about that some of those are already there, maybe with the KCC, but how do we make sure that we're kind of capturing those relationships in, some of it's just about, reporting in a way so that you guys as WIB members are able to kind of keep track of some of that work, right? And with these 90-minute meetings, and we just went through a whirlwind of all the different populations that we want to make sure that we are working with, right? We talked about individuals, all kinds of different barriers, right? Whether they're parenting youth or individuals with disabilities or individuals with a language barrier or something like that. And so I think the real intention from our team standpoint with making this plan is how do we really capture some of these things in a way that you're able to know as a board member that this work continues, right? Even as it does go on. So really appreciate you guys sharing that. I think that would be good. Selfishly, I was a Spanish major in college, and I would love to meet the folks from Esperanza, because I always feel like I would like to maybe revitalize that skill set, which is quite dormant now.
Well, I would think,
so-
too, I mean, you know, you teach an ESL there, Tara. I mean, my daughter does that too, and now's the perfect time because she's making lots of extra money on the side teaching
Nice.
ESL via Zoom. I mean,
Is she really?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, she works for HCA, but on the side, she's teaching ESL on Zoom. And I don't think the WIB was going to focus on something. You're in the perfect environment to, you know, be able to do that via Zoom now.
Interesting. Cool. That's fascinating. Yes.
Hey Tara, something, and maybe I missed this, if I did, it's just let me know. But as we're looking at the plan and we're thinking about, you know, what's going on nationally, we're hearing a lot about equity and making sure that policies are equitable with employers. And I don't know if we have any type of a strategy to help us to focus on that locally as a WIB. Because I know, and Alicia may be able to talk more about what legislation could potentially come out, but we know that there's going to be a focus on looking at employers and how equitable they are, not, you know, across the board, but even in leadership roles and all of that. So I don't know if that's part of the plan or not.
It is. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. So first of all, I just want to celebrate the fact that we got through every single one of the PY specific questions for the local and regional plan. So thank you guys so much for just trudging through that. But Katrina, to your point, every committee has sort of different assignments in order to kind of divide and conquer. But I was going to go to the strategic plan next, which is obviously for everybody, and equity is a huge piece of that. We did have a meeting there's actually an ad hoc committee that's been put together to make sure the strategic plan gets done well. And they have been focusing on the mission, vision, and values statements for the WIB. And each one of those statements, we've been looking at how do we add that equity lens, and how do we really reflect diversity, equity, inclusion in a way that is present and it's also really clear. So what has been proposed by that group is that we add basically a DEI. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second. But add a diversity, equity, inclusion value state, like in the values document, and that might be its own standalone statement, as well as making sure that it's there in the mission, vision, and values piece. But that doesn't mean that we can't talk about it here at PY. We just had to get through all of those individual questions first. So we definitely have time. And that's why I had asked you to send us the statement that Community Action Commission has, because we've just been collecting, you know, the WIB has kind of its own unique, just like every organization needs when it comes to a statement like that, and kind of what it's going to allow us to do, because, you know, it might be board membership related. It could be things around procurement that could come into play. It could be service provision, you know, thinking, we did, sort of a side note, but related, we have asked for subcontractor through Brighton Center to try to better track, and it's going to require like changes in their system, because at the state level there's really not a way to track information by race and ethnicity, but we have asked, and they've agreed that they will start tracking data that way for clients that are WIOA enrolled specifically. We don't know yet if we can do it for every single person that comes in the KCC, because that's next, but we can track it for WIOA enrolled individuals. So I think the answer to your question is yes, absolutely. In terms of what I was going to ask next, which is, this leads perfectly into that, is when we think about the strategic plan, which again, we have a little bit more time for diving into as a board, but you know, I think we see some trends arising throughout everyone's comments and kind of knowing the key roles that the WIB plays. You know, we see trends arising with how are we serving job seekers differently, maybe than we did in the past. I think we're seeing some trends arising through the survey and the meetings about how are we serving employers well in a time that's pretty challenging for them. And another trend I see is how are we really living out and making decisions based on all the data that is had. And then I think the fourth trend really is, I mean, it's in every single person's, I think, or almost every response and survey, how do we make sure that we're living and really reflecting upon, you know, a stance of equity and inclusion, you know, in the work. So those are the four trends that I see. And that was going to be my next question for you all is, you know, this is your plan. So do you think I've kind of got that roughly right as far as trends? I mean, trends are a far cry from a strategic plan, but we've got some weeks and months ahead to iron that out. But I'm curious if you guys see those trends. Do you see other areas of focus that you want to make sure that the strategic plan captures? What do you guys think? Because I think we probably need, you know, from the last strategic plan, it was pretty lengthy, which is, you know, one tactic, but I think it would be great if we could try to have some really key, you know, 3-4 priority areas where the board's enable every single meeting to really do a benchmark of, hey, how are we doing on our, you know, on our effort for this? So, okay. So Jamie, would you mind kind of talking a little bit about some of the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation? I hate to put you on the spot, but just some of what was talked about at the committee. The plan is that at the next strategic planning committee, the ad hoc committee, that there will be a draft diversity, like a value statement for review. So it's definitely still very much pending, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Jamie, since you were there.
Well, so there was a lot of discussion at that meeting in regards to diversity. I think it's safe to say that everybody on the committee felt like there needed to be something about diversity in the mission, vision, and values. The discussion really ensued around where does that diversity piece fall in our mission, vision, and values. And so there was some discussion about, you know, is it a value statement or is it actually part of, you know, is it actually part of the value statement, or then what were the kind of the bullet points we had below that? What do we call those values, I guess, as well?
Yeah.
Anyway, there was some discussion of where that diversity needed to fall in regards to the mission, vision, and values, but everybody agreed that we needed to have something in there about inclusion and diversity and all those types of things. So that's pretty much, I hate to think I just summed up an hour conversation, but that's really, it was just a lot of conversation about wording and wordsmithing,
right.
That kind of stuff. You all been in those situations where you start out with a conversation, I think it's good to kind of cut it off and let's visit this, because we're just kind of going around in circles at that particular point. All agree on the same thing, just not exactly where it should be put.
Yep. No, I would agree with that. I just kind of wanted to have another
I don't
voice.
recall though, Terry, we never discussed defining diversity, did we? We just said we wanted to have diversity.
There was definitely, I think, conversation amongst the group of this is what diversity means to me. And this, like, so somebody was talking about, for them, diversity was pretty broad, so maybe it's how we serve any individuals with barriers or just a unique experience. So it could even be someone who's a veteran, or, so it was like a very broad. And then others were talking about the need to really focus on racial and ethnic diversity and specifically calling out, how are we reaching, that equity lens, and how are our policies and practices affecting, individuals and minority groups that have historically, not maybe have been challenged, economically through non-equitable policies in the past. So I think there was a wide range of thoughts about what diversity meant, and that did lead to a robust conversation about how the wording should be in the document. So to your point, Jamie, defining it as we make that statement would I think be quite helpful. Well, you guys have gone through a lot of information in a really short period of time. You're looking a little tired. It's okay. It's still morning. Does anybody have, this is kind of a key time to really weigh in on anything that you really feel strongly about that would be in the strategic plan. So again, kind of coming up, looking at trends, trying to identify areas of priority focus. Like I said, we've got the diversity and equity piece identified as an area that's going to need to be fleshed out a significant way in the plan. We've got how we are using our data to make choices is something that keeps coming up. And then, these are super broad, but really serving our job seekers, serving the individuals that come to us through the Career Center, and then serving our employers. Obviously, we do have a little bit more time to dig into those for the strategic plan piece, but if there's anything that somebody wants to say, I would really love to hear it.
Tara, I've got a couple of thoughts here. So, we've started to form affinity groups at our company. A women's network, a veterans network. We are going to start one with racial and ethnic ethnicity backgrounds, but as we're trying to get our feet wet in those affinity groups, we're starting from scratch. We're trying to build our networks, understand what other people are doing. And I just think, this particular group and all of our resources, I've been leveraging them on leading the veterans group. But I think that there's something we should do more intentionally as an investment board to help build a coalition, for our employers that we can benchmark and best practice and, create a network similar to what we've done with the opioid pandemic. We've really built a kind of a hub that we can all come together and socialize ideas. So I think we can probably put some verbiage in our strategic plan around doing that. I think, just being the egg and the meatloaf, I like to say, to hold it all together.
That is the best analogy I've ever heard. I really appreciate that, Jamie, and I think that's absolutely a role that the WIB could play. The people that we have around this table are so strong in their various capacities, and I think having you guys have just more time to talk is key.
I got another idea on another front. We talked a little bit about it, But in our K through 12, there are so many great programs available to school systems that, especially I'm in a rural community, and I would imagine there are other communities in similar situations where, funding is a huge barrier to getting these programs into our school systems. And I see it here in Gallatin County being a major barrier. We were a primary sponsor for the Leader in Me in the elementary and middle schools. But those programs are, very expensive. And I think that, we as a group should consider, how can we, have a seat at that table and be a contributor, especially from a financial perspective. And do we have a perspective on, what's best in class out there? What's something that is affordable and scalable, in our region that would be a best practice? Because I think folks are doing their own work in silos, but we haven't really taken a comprehensive look at that and approach. So I threw that out there as well.
Very cool. Well, I don't know if he's still on here. Randy Poe, the Education Council is in the midst of their strategic plan process as well. And I think it would be really, really interesting to see how do we make sure that we align some of your needs and some of your thoughts about, getting into the schools at an early time to really build those, right? Those character skills, those work ethic skills and so forth. Randy, I don't know what you think about that. I know it's tricky for the WIB because we don't necessarily always have the funding for that, but if there's a way that we could support that, gosh, that'd be a win for everybody. Randy, any thoughts about that?
Well, yeah, I think, that's what we're working on in our reorganization and realignment is how do we, make a difference in that social emotional learning. And the Leader in Me, as was just mentioned, was a big program, but is expensive. There's the other things like from ITLN, the Orange Frog experience for students. But yeah, that's what we're looking at. And that's what we're hoping to come up with at our fall convening, information around that, getting from the superintendents, what are the best practices that we can all utilize. So it would help within your strategic planning and ours, with that viable conversation and so forth.
Jamie, this is Francis O'Hara. I'd like to add, when we talk about working in silos and such, we've done so much in Northern Kentucky, but Gallatin County High School is probably about a 30 or 35-minute drive to Ignite, which is a regional program. And Ignite, the teaching staff, when you talk about the cost factor, there's already been probably about $350,000 on trainings for the teachers to be able to teach classes such as Project Lead the Way, engineering, biomedical, computer science, that most school systems can't afford. So that being a regional campus, just speaking with your superintendent and your leaders in Gallatin County, in 30 minutes, the kids can be there. And I hate to say it, I'm an old guy. So when and Ignite is a career tech school. It's what we used to call vocational schools. It's just a different type. It's an all-day school. And the flip side of it is that the original intent of all career tech schools in the state were to be within 30 minutes of any school system that could not offer what they needed. And there it was within 30 minutes. So if you think about it, Gallatin County High School is probably about a 35-minute drive. And you could take advantage of the programs there pretty quickly.
Thanks for that, Francis. And I'll certainly explore that and ask some questions. I'm sure that there's folks within our school system that are familiar with it. Just curious, but I've not heard much about it in terms of momentum. So I'll take that away. Thank you.
Well, I did make a note, Jamie, thank you for elevating that issue about how to make sure that we are really intentional about linking into the Education Council's social emotional learning piece, in our own plan. And so how do we make sure that we are sort of mutually, influencing and hopefully being able to impact, some of those needs that students have. Because again, that's what's going to help them be successful, right, in the and I could, oh my goodness, from my days at United Way, we could talk about social emotional learning all day long. So, it's really critical for sure.
Well, and just to point out, we are surveying, over 30,000 students in Northern Kentucky. I know Gallatin is not part of that. The offer is there, and Grant, but Owen is, and they've actually have presented on the different topics and the different things that they've done from their social emotional. So we, whatever we can do to get the rural counties that are below Boone, Kenton, and Campbell would be advantageous for all of us if we could get them to get more involved in these issues. So the web might be a good place for us to start, because I think they kind of utilize your services more than some of the other nonprofits in the area.
Okay, that's good feedback. Okay, well, I am going to turn it back over to our chair. I really appreciate everybody's feedback today. If you need or think of something else, please reach out to me or to Tony, and we would be happy to make sure that your comment gets added. Jamie, back to you. Jamie Parsons, I should say.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. I mean, that was a great discussion on our strategic planning things that we have going on. So thank you to everybody for their input. That was really good. So that was the last thing that we had on our agenda today. Is there any other business that anybody wanted to bring up? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned for the day. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.